Good Wednesday morning to you. As we continue to think about Epiphany and how God reveals himself to us through the manifestation of Jesus Christ, that's Word made flesh, I want to talk to you a little bit about how the Psalms, as we talked about yesterday, the Psalms remind us of Christ's presence in the Old Testament. Now, today, there's an interesting overlap that happens. Jesus, before he heads to the cross and grave and resurrection, he has this interaction. And it's actually a question that the Pharisees posed to Jesus about his divinic order, how he can claim to be who he is, while the Pharisees understand the divinic order, the promise that one day the Messiah would come from Jesus. So this happens in the Gospel of Matthew, the 22nd chapter, and it's verses 41 through 45. This is what we read in Matthew. Now, when the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them this question: "What do you think of the Messiah? Whose son is he?" They said to him, "The son of David." That is what has been foretold, so that's the answer they gave. He said to them, "How is it then that David, by the Spirit, calls him Lord, saying, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put my enemies under your feet'? If David thus calls him Lord, how can he be his son?" No one was able to give him an answer, nor from that day did anyone dare ask him any more questions. So in the Gospel of Matthew, it's important to remember that this gospel writer is writing to the community of Jews. He is a Jew, and he's writing to the community of Jews. So a lot of the details that are put into the stories are important for the Jewish faith. It's why the Gospel of Matthew starts out with the genealogy of Jesus. That, the generations that prove that Jesus is the Messiah promised are important because to Jews, that's an important detail. But in verse 44, when Jesus is asking this question to the Pharisees, when he's asking what David says, Jesus is actually quoting Psalm 110. It's kind of a fascinating twist because normally the Pharisees would ask Jesus and try to kind of pin him in a corner. This time Jesus is coming to the Pharisees and asking them a question that they should have an answer to. The Pharisees and the scribes were the ones who memorized the Torah and the Psalms and all of the ancient texts. They were the authorities on this text. And so for Jesus to ask this question, he really is pushing against their wheelhouse, their knowledge, and asking them to prove how they are limited in their sight. Now, for our time together, it is important for us to turn to Psalm 110. The Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. The Lord sends out from Zion your mighty scepter. Rule in the midst of your foes. Your people will offer themselves willingly on that day. You lead your forces on the holy mountain. From the womb of the morning, like dew, your youth will come to you. The Lord has sworn, and it will not change his mind. You are a priest forever, according to the order of Melchizedek. The Lord is at your right hand. He will shatter kings on the day of his wrath. He will execute judgment among the nations, filling them with corpses. He will shatter heads over the wide earth. He will drink from the stream by the path. Therefore he will lift up his head. Now, this psalm is attributed to a victory over a priest king. But because Jesus quotes this, we have this even more concrete connection to who Jesus is in this world and who David, as both a faithful leader and really a prophet-like speaker, speaks into the future. Maybe beyond his own understanding in the moment, he speaks into the future. The first verse is what Jesus quotes. The Lord says to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. But in verse 4, we also have this call. You are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek. Melchizedek will show up twice in the scriptures. Once in Genesis, when the Abraham and his people are successful, Melchizedek comes to the Valley of the Kings which will later become known as the Kidron Valley. This is the valley that Jesus crosses over from Gethsemane to, from Caiaphas to Gethsemane, and then once he's arrested, from Gethsemane to the Sanhedrin to stand trial before he is crucified. Melchizedek also is part of the order. When Abraham's successful, Melchizedek comes with offerings for Abraham. And not only does he bring him earthly offerings, he also brings him bread and wine. So the order of Melchizedek is represented in the priestly order of bread and wine. And later, the writer of Hebrews, as he preaches that beautiful sermon that we call the book of Hebrews, he will call Jesus the priest over the order of Melchizedek. Because Jesus, in his final night with his disciples, with those for whom he loved most, had preached and proclaimed most with in this world, he offers them bread and wine in remembrance of the sacrifice he was about to engage in. We gather together each week in that order of Melchizedek. We gather together in the remembrance of what Christ has done for us, in the real presence of Christ's body and blood given and shed for us on the cross. So again, when we think about the Psalms, when we think about the ancient texts, as we read them, we do not read them projecting our own faith or understanding. We read them for what they are. Jesus quotes them and points to himself in them. And today in Psalm 110, we have no better example than what we read and see how Jesus is present. Again, it's a lot of layers, peeling away the layers, or as I like to say, peeling away the string cheese to get to the core of what we're talking about. At the end of the day, life is all about Christ, who Christ is, how Christ is our center, how we draw our actions and our lives and our decisions and all that moves us forward in response to who Christ is and what Christ has done for us. It is a beautiful thing to remember that, as Galatians reminds us, it is no longer I who lives, but Christ who lives within me. That the failings and the disappointments that we so often are part of because of our human brokenness, God finds a way to make that fresh and new every day. That God finds a way to restore us to him and bring us to a new understanding. That is what we read in Psalm 10. It's what we find in the Gospel of Matthew. It is what the essence of faith is all about. Have a great Wednesday.